so that's going to be kind of the outlines of the evening. So our presentation tips each, roughly 30 minutes total. Q&A, special coaching thing, more Q&A, and a good time will be had by all. Sound good?
Yes, sir.
All right. So for my presentation tip, I want to actually tell you a story. It was February of 2004. Now, if you think about what the weather is typically like in February, even in Texas, it can be mild, it can be cold, or it can be frozen to the bone. But I was in Jamaica, man. The weather was probably between 80 to 85 degrees. There was a soft, warm breeze blowing. It was paradise. You know where I'm going. Shut up. By the way, let me pause that for a second. One of the things you will notice is that when any of the world champions get together, we love poking at each other and having fun, and we all respect each other's accomplishments. I mean, they respect mine more than I respect theirs, but we have a good time, so you'll get to witness that. So, but I was in Jamaica because I was on a cruise. Now, if you've never taken a cruise, you get on the ship and they go to 1, 2, 3, or however many different ports of call, and while you're there, you can disembark from the ship and do something on land. And one of the stops we had was in Jamaica. We booked an excursion through the cruise ship, and so there were a large number of people from our ship that were doing the same things that we were. Now, I wasn't just there with my wife, I was there with a larger group. We had the inaugural Cruise with the Champions. Several world champions, Ed and I, Darren LaCroix, David Brooks, Mark Brown, we took a cruise and had other Toastmasters who wanted to come with us, and then we would do seminars when we were at sea, and then we would do excursions when we were booked. So a large number of people in our group were on the same excursion as I was. And part of that was they had what equates to a Jamaican petting zoo. There were several different stations, and they had an animal and an animal handler, and the group would go over to that station, and the animal handler would explain something about that animal, and then the group would migrate over to the next station, the next animal. That animal handler would do the same thing, and the group would just kind of migrate around. And sometimes you can take a picture. I have a picture of me holding a macaw, which is like a giant parrot, extremely colorful, upside down with its talons, as if it were dead. They had trained it to behave, and so I got a picture like that. So we went around to different stations, and we came to this one station where the animal they had were snakes. Now, if you're someone who's a little bit skittish around snakes, there was no obligation to press in close. But I don't have that issue, so I pressed in close, and they told us about the snakes, and then our group migrated over, except I stayed behind because I wanted to have a picture with the snake. And there was one other person who stayed behind, and this person wasn't just from our ship. They were from our Cruise with the Champions group. In fact, it was one of the other world champions. Now, since that person is not here right now to defend himself, it would be wrong for me to identify him. But his initials are Ed Tate. So at any rate, so Ed had stayed behind, and as the group migrated away, Ed goes forward, he whispered something to the guy said something. He gives Ed the snake, they take the picture, he gives the guy the snake back, and he leaves to catch up with the group. And so I approached the guy and said, hey, I want to have my picture taken with the snake also. And he goes, okay, I'm not supposed to do this, Mom, but if you give me $5, I will. And I thought, you know what? I appreciate the entrepreneurial spirit. This picture is going to be worth more than $5. To me, this is a bargain. Absolutely. I gave him $5. He gave me the snake. We took the pictures. I gave him the snakes back, and he said, I also got the weed for you, Mom. And I thought, no, you don't. You may have the weed for somebody, but you do not have the weed for me. Oh, no problem, Mom. So I go to catch up with my group. Now, I catch up with Ed first. And I say, Ed, did the guy say you had to give him $5 for a picture? He said, yeah. I said, did he also say he had the weed for you? And Ed said, no. I had questions that needed answering. What is it that caused this guy to look at this man and say, he's a guy with no problem, man, and look at me and see the need for weed? What is that different? Now, I don't know. If I had to do it in retrospect, I would go back and ask him. But I think I know what it was. I didn't quite look like this, and I didn't have facial hair, I didn't have an earring, but I was wearing on my head this exact bandana. And there, I think, was a perception that, if he's into the tie-dye, let me hold this for a second. Thank you. Good assistants are really hard to come by. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, we see it too.
So, yeah, you see it too. So yeah, I don't know with certainty, but I think he probably had a perception because of what this meant to him. There was probably some, preconceived idea. Maybe he had encountered the biggest pothead in the world wearing one of these. I don't know. But it's entirely possible. So here's the presentation tip that I have for you based on this really silly, goofy story. One of the most important things you can do when you are in the moment of presenting and when you are preparing to present is keep the perspective, keep the mindset of your audience in mind. Because it drives how they receive everything about you, how they interpret how you look, how you sound, your stage presence, how well spoken you are, the specific words that you use, how well crafted your stories may be, and how well that blends into the message of your speech. Your audience's perspective is important. Now, I'm not going to say it's the only thing that's important. Your perspective and your mindset and everything you bring to the stage is too. But as George Bernard Shaw is famous for saying, the problem with communication is the assumption that it has occurred. I may have an idea that's perfect right here, but if I don't take into account your perspective, what you bring to your role as an audience member, then I may not connect well, I may not get that across, and my joke may be funny in here, but it may not be funny once it leaves my mouth. My wife told me I said something that I thought was clever, and she said, that was probably funnier inside your head. I thought, I'm a world champion. No. But so here's the thing. Your audience's perception has to be kept in mind, because only when you do that can you serve them well. Perception drives reception. And so if you take that into account, they will receive you better, they will receive your message better, and it will be a more successful presentation moment for you. Now, what I get to do is help set a little perspective as I'm going to introduce one of my colleagues. So I had fun mentioning Ed, and the reason he started laughing when I said Jamaica in 2004, he was in an audience where I told that story before, and so he knew that I was going to have some fun at his expense. The first time I experienced Ed tape was on video. At the 2000 fall conference here, I don't know why they were doing this, but they were having judges training at the fall conference. Usually that's a TLI thing. But they were having judges training, and I was competing in the humorous speech contest that year. I was at the conference. I wanted to take the judges training. They were using that year's World Championship of Public Speaking as target speakers for the trained judges. They had 2 or 3 different speeches that they showed. It was on VHS then, so it was,
For the young people.
Yeah, some people go VHS, pre-DVD. But they played this, and when they played Ed's speech, I was beyond impressed. I'm like, wow, that is incredible. Fast forward to the next spring, I was our district's international speech champion, so I went to what was the semifinal speech then. They had it a month or 2 before the convention, and at a regional conference. And so Ed, the reigning champion, spoke there that night. He was a keynote speaker at the conference. And so I got to hear him speak from the second row for an hour, and I was blown away. I thought, I want to be that when I grow up. Except maybe minus the growing up part, but that's a different issue. But I was in awe, and I asked Ed, right after his presentation, I said, I'm competing in the speech contest tonight. If I am fortunate enough to win, can I ask you, can I send you some questions? And he was very gracious. He said, yeah, absolutely. I sent him an email. I don't remember what I asked you. I don't remember what you answered, but I remember the signature line said, Ed Tate, 2000 World Champion of Public Speaking. I was like, woo! If that don't raise the hair on the back of your neck if you have it, nothing will. Since then, I've had the chance to share the stage with Ed a number of times. I've been impressed every single time because he is a great presenter, and off the stage, he's a great guy. You are in for a treat. I'll ask you to do 2 things. Number 1, buckle up and hold on, because you're going to get some incredible content. But before you do that, number 2, please help me give a rousing District 50 welcome to the 2000 World Champion of Public Speaking, my personal friend, Ed Tate.
Ed, don't get on the plane on Monday. What do you mean, Ed? If I don't get on the plane on Monday, I'm going to miss the conference on Tuesday and Wednesday. Ed, don't get on the plane on Monday. Today we've laid off all of our employees. It's our last day in business. Don't get on the plane on Monday. What are you talking about, Ed? We've been working on this conference for 10 months, 12-hour days. The only thing I need to do is hop on this plane, deliver this content, and at the end of the month, you give me a check for $30,000. What about my money, Ed? Where's my money? I'm sorry, Ed. There is no money. Goodbye. Raise your hands if you think I had a bad day. Not only was it a bad day, you see, that customer, that client was worth $250,000. It had been a bad week. You see, the week before that, I lost another customer, also worth $250,000. In a span of 10 days, I had gone from fee to free. And for those of you playing the entrepreneur game, that's not how it works. So I decided to call one of my friends. His name is Mark Sanborn. Mark Sanborn is the past president of the National Speakers Association. He's in the Hall of Fame. He has a book called The Threat Factor, How to Turn the Ordinary into the Extraordinary. It has sold over 2 million copies worldwide. I got him on the phone and I started ranting and raving. And in the middle of my ranting and raving, he said to me, he said, Ed, if they owe you $30,000, in all likelihood they owe other people even more money than that. He says, it's probably best to let go and to let. Okay, only 2 of you know the words. Is that right? So I'm dealing with heathens here. Is that right? I just need to know. That's all. You know. He said, let go and let God. And I remember thinking to myself, why am I talking to him? He's rich. I need to be talking to some of my broke friends. How many of you have broke friends? How many of you are the broke friend? So I decided to call up another friend of mine. Her name is Lisa Jo Landsberg. And let's be clear, there's nothing broken about Lisa Jo. So I get on the phone again and I start ranting and raving. And she says to me, she says, Eddie, I can't talk to you now. I says, what do you mean, Lisa Jo? You're one of my best friends. If you can't lend me your ear, can you at least lend me some money? I can't talk to you now. There's a boogeyman in our neighborhood. You see, it was Friday, November the 3rd. Earlier in the week, it had been Halloween. I thought it was some vague reference to Halloween. I said, Lisa Jo, what do you mean there's a boogeyman in the neighborhood? And she said, I just found out. My next door neighbors, their 5-year-old and their 4-year-old daughters have been assaulted. I can't talk to you now. Goodbye. In that moment, I realized I had no problems. You see, the only thing I lost was money. And the truth of the matter is, I'm really good at making money. I'm not good at keeping it, but I'm good at making money. And these little girls had lost something far more precious than money. They had lost their innocence and their childhood. And frankly, they'll never get that back. And unfortunately, the boogeyman was never captured. Friends, my pity party was over. And my friend Mark Sanborn, he was right. It was time for me to let go and to let God. So from that moment on, by the way, I need to give you some context. I need to give you some background. You see, at that time, we didn't know it at the time, it was the dawn of the worldwide economic crisis. It was in November of 2007. And I had some challenges. I had some big time money challenges. You see, I had just gotten divorced, actually $500,000. My son went to Georgetown University, $50,000 a year, US, my money. I had bills to pay and I had no way of knowing how I was going to do it. There were some times I would sleep in my bed and I couldn't sleep. There were some times I'd be at the dinner table and I couldn't eat. Have you ever been that stressed out? Raise your hands if you have. I had to find a way. And I'm happy to say, not only did I find a way, I found a way that was going to work every single time. Fast forward 1 year, again, 2008, the worldwide economic crisis, starting all over from scratch. A year later, I created $280,000 worth of business. Now, I don't say that to impress you, I say that to impress upon you the following. It's never the economy, it's always your economy. And regardless of the economy, guess what? There's always business if you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to hustle. The word is hustle. What's the word? Hustle. Tell your neighbor what the word is. Hustle. Tell your neighbor what the word is. Hustle. And turn to your other neighbors and say, I'm a hustler. So let me ask you this question. What made the difference between then, me losing it all, and 1 year later, doing almost $300,000 worth of business? What makes the difference between then
Hustle.
and now? Thank you. Hustle. What else made the difference?
Attitude.
Attitude. So what specifically about my attitude? What type of attitude did I have to have? I had to have a positive attitude.
Abundance.
Excuse me?
Abundance.
I had to have an abundance attitude. What else?
Purposeful.
Purposeful attitude. Absolutely. And every one of these answers is correct. So I'm going to stop right here. So that's the opening of one of my keynote presentations. I teach a program called Guerrilla Marketing. How to go from prospects to profits in 7 steps. So I want you to talk among yourselves just for 60 seconds. What were some of the elements of that story that made it memorable for you at your table? So at your tables or your neighbors close to you, talk 60 seconds. What were the memorable elements of that story? 60 seconds, go. You're the tracker. All right, let's talk about it. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
Internet, 20 bucks. All right, so what were some elements of that story that made it memorable for you? Anyone?
Let go and let God.
Let go and let God. That memorable phrase, a phrase that many of us are familiar with. Thank you. What else?
Hustle.
Hustle. This ability to hustle. And here's something else I want to address. I've coached literally hundreds of people between 2007 and I do that today. As a matter of fact, one of my coaching clients, you're going to meet him in a couple of moments. The thing that fascinates me about the majority of the people I coach, and the coaching client you're about to meet is an exception to that rule. The vast majority of people have some type of hang-up about money. Isn't it interesting that we have the richest country in the world? We do the most advertising in the world, but when it comes to talking about money, it's something that it just drives us crazy. Does that make sense? So one of the things about money, if you have a hope of running your own business, you have to let go of any type of shortcomings you have around money. Specifically, asking for money for yourself. Does that make sense? Is this good stuff? Please turn to your neighbors and tell them, I told you he was good. Couple more comments. What were some other things that were memorable about that story?
Going to character. As far as whatever role character you're talking about, you're going to a character. You take on a character.
Very, very good point. One of the things, can you guys hear me? Because my mic seems to be not working very well. Here's a key to telling a story. All 3 of us are full-time professional speakers. All 3 of us have told some stories over and over and over again. I've told that story well over 100 times. Here is the secret to telling a story over and over and over again and making it sound new and fresh. Are you curious?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
The energy's kind of low. I'm not too sure. How do you feel? Here's a secret. You relive it rather than retelling it. For example, when I was walking up here, I still remember having the conversation with Ann. The conversation took place at 8:31 a.m. Eastern Time. I still remember when Ann gave me that call. And we've been working on a project literally for 10.5 months. And the only thing, it was a Friday, the only thing I had to do was hop on the plane on Monday. I was going to get this huge payday. And that payday, by the way, never happened. So what you have to do is relive it. You have to relive the circumstances, the shock, the anger. I literally yelled at that woman on the phone. What are you talking about? You owe me this money. And again, keep in mind my context. Divorce, big time divorce. My son going to Georgetown University. I'm going to actually pay for my son's schooling. The stress that was going through. So the thing I'm inviting you to do is don't retell a story, relive a story. Does that make sense? Okay, good stuff. So I'm going to, that's my time. I'm going to introduce our next presenter tonight. Lance, Lance always had this, there's a couple things I need to tell you about Lance. At the World Championship of Public Speaking, all the world champions, we sit together, and we have our own evaluation system. And it has nothing to do with the Toastmasters evaluation system. But Lance, and I don't know what it is, but typically we're sitting next to each other. So we're sitting next to each other, and Lance would hear these remarkable stories, you know, of someone who had an injury, they overcame drugs, they overcame these big obstacles. And Lance said, you know what, I've had a pretty boring life. And he says, I wish that I had some type of major trauma or major accident in my life so I would have a story to tell. Some of you are getting ahead of me, right? When was it, Lance?
December 20th.
December of this year, last year.
Yeah, wait, then, yeah.
December 20th. Well, be careful what you ask for. So, are you going to tell them about it, or?
Whatever. You
I think you probably tell them better. All right,
go ahead.
So I'm gonna leave. That's called a cliffhanger. So I'm gonna leave it as a cliffhanger. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a rousing welcome to Mr. Lance Miller. Thank you.
Yeah, I know you look at me and you say that guy's perfect and he hasn't had a bad day in his whole life, right? Yeah. It was actually in 1992. There's a couple of defining things I want to share with you that I play really significant into my story, and it's going to hopefully tie into that intro I got. I'll see what I can do to pull this together. I had been audited for 6 years in a row by the IRS, and I didn't appreciate that. And it was basically due to, quite honestly, political motivations, not economic motivations. Okay, it was specific affiliations I had, which I'm not going to go into, but it was just like I'm just living my American life, but there were, as we've heard, there was abuse going on with the government recently. And so I went to an event with a group that was proposing a tax program that didn't require an IRS because of the abuse that organization was propagating. And the president told his story, and he said there was this guy, he left his house one day, and his wife said, be back at 5 o'clock for our wedding anniversary. I'll have dinner ready. And he goes, I forgot it was our anniversary. So I got to get her a present. So he goes to a pet store and he says, I need something great. And the pet owner goes, I got this parrot. And this parrot speaks 7 languages and it can translate. It's probably the smartest parrot in the world. He goes, great. You send it over at 6. I'll get home at 5 and I'll give it to my wife. Well, he gets home, like most guys, about 8 o'clock that night. And he walks in, and the table's set, and the candles are lit, and the wine's poured, and they sit down, and they toast their marriage, and then she brings out the main dish, which is the parrot. And he goes, how could you cook that bird? That was the smartest bird in the world. It spoke 7 languages. It could translate. And then he said, well, if it's so smart, why didn't it say something? And that was a joke I heard at that meeting. And then he said, I figure out if I don't stand up and say something, I too may get cooked. Now, who here has ever gotten cooked because you didn't say something? Anybody? You ever get in trouble because you didn't speak up when you should have? Something occurred. You should have said something about it. Who here has gotten cooked because they said something? See, there's the problem. And that was a problem that I faced in life too. I tried to be outspoken. I had been in business situations, and I'd grown up in a family business that was in some cases, was the most incredible learning experience I had, but the nepotistic aspects of that business, the family aspects of it, were really brutal. So there was a lot of oppression and invalidation and egos in play and stuff like that. So I moved to California to figure my life out, and I wound up working with Nestle, and I'm this young guy that I've got more experience in in the food industry than most of the MBAs I'm working with. So I'm trying to be outspoken in meetings, and I'm getting kicked around and getting bad names associated with me. A lot of it was dues. It was probably pretty accurate when I look back on it. But I was in a state in my life where I was like, if I spoke out, I was damned, and if I didn't speak out, I was damned. I was like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. So I wound up stumbling into Toastmasters, and I actually started speaking, just so you know, my two first big speaking things. I was a national spokesperson for what's called the Fair Tax Initiative, which has some roots here in Texas, and debated federal tax policy in over 300 radio shows around the country. Which I got trained in PR and everything, but I was so nervous doing that stuff, but I believed in it. I felt like if I didn't speak up, I was going to get cooked. And then I joined Toastmasters, and some of you probably heard the story. I've been in Toastmasters about 2 months when the contest started. And they have Tall Tales and they have the International Speech Contest. And I go, what is the International Speech Contest? Tall Tales I can understand. So I go up to the founder of our club, a lady named Roberta Perry. Roberta is now a past international director. She's been in Toastmasters since 1974. One of the first women in Toastmasters. She always makes sure I tell you that she was 6 when she joined. And I said, what's the World Champion of Public Speaking? And she said, oh, that's where what's the International Speech Contest? And she said, that's where they have the World Champion of Public Speaking. You could be the World Champion of Public Speaking. And I looked at her and I said, no, I couldn't. What is it? Now, I hope I don't have to explain that logic to you. I did not know what it was I couldn't be. But what I knew is it had the words world champion associated with it, and I knew that wasn't me. Her next words haunted me for 9 years. She said, that's like you had 5 to 7 minutes to speak to the world. I want you to think just for a second. If there was a huge contest, every year we selected one human being to speak to all the other human beings on planet Earth, and you were selected. You had 7 minutes to impact the direction that mankind is going. What would you say? And I knew immediately what I would say. Please, pick somebody else. Pick somebody smart. Pick somebody who knows what they're doing. There's got to be somebody better than me. That's what I would have said when I said it. And for the next 9 years, I lost the International Speech Contest for 9 years in my club, largely because every time I wrote a speech, I tried to act like it was the biggest, most important speech in the world, and this was a really big subject that everybody should know about, and it had nothing to do with me. It wasn't my story. It was some issue that I thought we needed to talk about, that I thought the audience would go, woo, that was really good. Oh gosh, that was a brilliant point, Lance. It had nothing to do with me. The first year I won the World Championship, that was 2005. It was 2001, the first year I got out of my club. I was going to the club, and I was rehearsing the speech on the driver's side, the passenger side of the car, and I stopped at a stoplight, and I'm looking at the speech, and I went, I don't want to give this speech. I'm not interested in this. I'm going to lose the contest anyway. I might as well talk about something I want to talk about. Now, I also want you to understand I had one of the largest, most successful clubs in Toastmasters. We had 95 members in our club. The club contest was more difficult than the district contest. I'm not kidding. There were 10 speakers in the club contest, and they were all good speakers. So I rewrote a speech going to the club that morning, and I went in, and I sort of sketched it out in the back, got up, gave my speech. Knew I was going to lose, so I didn't really care if I won or not. I just wanted to talk to the audience, and I had something to say. I wanted them to hear it. And I won the contest. And I learned a very valuable lesson at that point. You've got to connect the subject to you before you can connect it to the audience. You got to believe in what you're saying. And in life, I think we get all this misdirection. People get rewarded for standing up and espousing something, but do they believe it? We see in news media and in politicians and corporate events, people standing up and claiming one thing and doing another. But the power of your speaking comes. If you want to touch the heart of the audience, you speak as close to your heart as you can. And I'm sure Jim and Ed see the same thing when speakers come to you and there's this speech that's completely disassociated with their existence. And then we all have a way of pulling that string down and going, why is that important? Tell me about this little piece right here. And then you pull this story out, and they don't think there's any value in that story. Because I didn't think there were any values in my stories. Because most of my life, I was told that my stories weren't that valuable. It's like, to lead into this, and I told this story a number of times, in the mid-90s, when I was losing all my speech contests, I was speaking a lot, but I wasn't winning the world champion, I wasn't winning any contests, and I was winning table topics, and I was winning speech evaluation, but international I wasn't winning at all. I was at a community event, and a lady was a homeless heroin addict, had been, and she's the keynote speaker. She's now married, has a couple kids, and she talks about what it's like to have a chemical substance control every thought, motivation, and have no money or wherewithal to put yourself back on the road of life you want to be at. And man, I'll tell you, when she was done, there went a dry eye in that room. And I sat out at one of those round dinner tables, and this is my thought. I was like, man, I wish I was a homeless heroin addict. And I was like, whoa, what a horrible thought. My next thought, honestly, was this. Maybe I could get hit by a truck on the way home and learn to walk in a year. And I go, why am I having these horrible thoughts? And then I really said, I want to inspire an audience like she does, but I haven't had any bad things happen to me. Have you ever felt like you didn't really have a story worth telling? Have you ever felt like you didn't have that thing that you could stand up and say, yes, I was wrongly incarcerated for murder for 15 years. And let me tell you what it's like to live with an injustice. And yeah, I didn't have stories like that. But what I looked at was all she did was tell her story. And her story happened to be the story of being a homeless heroin addict. There's a lot of speakers I've heard that don't have harrowing stories. I mean, look at these two guys, more vanilla than you could get in life. But what you do is you tell your story. And I started to look at what my story was. And then I just, I got really depressed. I came from a good family. I had a good education. And I had good jobs almost my whole life. There's nothing here. No, but I started to piece together the little pieces, the little things in life. And as a speaker, that's the one thing I want to really talk about. Tell your story. Figure out what it is. And I had to figure out what my story was. I didn't know what my story was. But I realized I had a purpose in life. And I was really trying to achieve that. I didn't really know what it was, but I started to look at all the actions. I went down and I wrote down the happiest days of my life, the days of my life I felt the most alive. And then I turned the paper over and I wrote down the worst days of my life, the days I felt most dead and I didn't want to live anymore. And then I looked at the two and I said, what was going on there? There's no one on there. And I started to look at the fact that I don't do well in a cubicle. Okay? I like fun games. I like action. I like activity. I love adventure. Okay? I'm not super money motivated. Because a lot of people were just trying to make me get more money. That's actually, I was more interested in people doing well, and people that I was more interested in that I made a positive difference in somebody's life than I got more money out of. And that's where I live. Now, trust me, there's a lot of people that tell me, Lance, you need to be more money motivated. And I look in the mirror and go, Lance, you need to be more money motivated on that. But the big thing is speak from your heart. Figure out what your story is. And the last thing I want to leave you with, because we can all stay up here and talk for 5 or 6 hours on this stuff, was there was something I was doing and I was having a really hard time figuring it out. But it was working. And I was having a hard time communicating it to the people that primarily I was coaching. Because when I was coming up the Toastmasters line, just so you know, I went to district 4 times, the regionals back then 3 times before I made it to the World Championship. And I was prepared to go to the World Championship 6 or 7 times. I just figured I got better every year, and if I didn't quit, I could win. I thought I might be 70 years old, but I could, I don't want to be 90 sitting on my front porch going, you could have been the world champion, you just hadn't quit. Because I've done a lot of things I quit in my life, and I could have been. But there was something I was doing, and I couldn't figure out what it was when I was coaching people. And a lot of what I've done is try to decode what I did so I could share it with people. And it was this simple thing. And I'm going to ask you to do something for a second. I hate it when people ask me to do this. But I'm going to ask you to do it. I'm going to do it with you. I want you to close your eyes for a second. I'm going to say a word. I want you to think of that word. Cat. Okay, open your eyes. Who got a picture of a cat when I said it? What did your cat look like?
Which one of them?
Well, give me which one of them.
Okay, I have a tux cat.
A tux cat. Who else got a picture of a cat? What did your cat look like?
White-haired cat.
White-haired cat. What did your head cat look
Black
like?
cat.
Was it black cat? Now that was 3 examples. They were all 3 different pictures in the mind of the audience, right? 1 3-letter word. 3 different images. Now what if I had a different image in my mind and you got a different image in your mind? You want to know the strangest answer I've ever gotten when I've done that? The guy said, a tractor. A caterpillar. Now what if you're talking about a cat and he's got a picture of a caterpillar? You think you're communicating? No. Here was the simple thing that I realized I started doing, and this is tricky and I don't have time to go into it. I look at the picture I'm painting in the mind of the audience instead of looking at the picture that's in my mind and try to describe that. What am I saying? I'm listening to my own words to pick at the picture I'm painting in your mind rather than the picture in my mind. Because I've coached all these people, they'll try to tell me this picture, they'll leave out all these details, but they see it really clearly, but it's not getting communicated. So therefore, look at your words. What do your words say, and what picture do you get when you look at the words? Not what words are describing your picture. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to leave you with that, but I do want to go full circle. I like adventure. I don't do well in a cubicle. And another form of a cubicle in Los Angeles is called a car. Because unlike Dallas, we have something called traffic. You don't have to laugh at that, some people do. Okay. So I was getting really bored about 10 years ago driving my car around, and I had this idea that I go, well, I'll get a motorcycle. I got a whole story about why I didn't have a motorcycle until I was 50 years old. But quite honestly, I asked my dad when I was 16 if I get a little scooter, and he goes, no, I don't want you riding a motorcycle. And I went, so in my mind, I said, I'm not supposed to ride a motorcycle. I never examined that for myself. Oh, I'm not supposed to do that. Why? I never looked at my dad told me. I'm not going, I fly airplanes, I sail sailboats, I drive 18-wheeler tractor trailers, I can drive backhoes, I can ride a motorcycle. So I got this motorcycle. I've been all over Colorado 2 or 3 times, camping in Death Valley, up and down California. I had an incredible time. I was going to a meeting on December 20th, and I woke up in the trauma center at County USC Hospital, and a pickup truck pulled out of an illegal left-hand turn in front of me, and I don't remember the accident, but broke my ankle, broke 3 ribs in my shoulder, and you know, you wake up and the policeman's there, what do you remember? You know, I'm like, I don't know, a white 4-door car, blue stop sign. I couldn't remember. You know, and they look down, your foot's off the end of your leg, and they go, we're going to set your foot. And they stick a needle through your arch, and you don't even feel it. You go, oh, that feels better now, right? But honest to Pete, here's, based on all this time about looking at life and finding my story, 90 seconds after waking up, I looked at it and I said, man, there's going to be a great speech in this. And Ed and I were in San Antonio about a year ago, and we were talking, and Ed looked at me and he goes, you know, speakers, we never have a bad day. We just have new material. And I gotta tell you, one of the best things you can do is talk about your bad day. Who here's ever had a bad day? Anybody? So, you think you have something to talk about to an audience that understands what bad days are about? Yeah, because everybody has a bad day. Now, who here's been a homeless heroin addict? Anybody? No, but everybody's had a bad day. What's going to resonate more, being a homeless